Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Subhash Kari, an Executive President and Chief Innovation Officer at Infocepts, overseeing our global practices and delivery organization. Today, I have with me Mr. Denish Bhavsar, Director of Global Data Governance at McCain Foods. Denish, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Moving on, I'm curious, Denish, right? Given sort of the number of requirements that you are trying to address, what is sort of your advice in terms of tools or technologies to enable data governance programs?
Yeah, I would say first focus on the process. It's great to have shiny tools in place, but if you don't have the capability or the organizational readiness to really harness the capability of the tool, then it's really gonna just sit there on the shelf. So what I would say is first focus on the process. What is it you're trying to drive? Typical data governance tools and capabilities out there in the market really help you with cataloging, data lineage, building that business glossary, understanding again what data we have, where does it reside, who's got access to it. You'll have tools that provide that marketplace for people to come and discover and explore. And you want them to explore. You want business users to explore and experiment with data. But you also want to make sure that you layer on top of that the data governance practice and workflows so that that exploration can then turn to industrialization, right? And you want to be able to help them go through that process. And there's many tools out there that help us with that. But first, I would say focus on the process versus the technology itself. And then you find the right tool to fit that scope and fit the maturity of the organization, right? So you may not be ready for such a Cadillac version, but right size that is what I would suggest.
Yeah, well, I love the term industrialization that you used. If for one of our clients in the APAC region, they are sort of in the duty-free retail business, we were able to improve user adoption by 5 times by simply providing them with a search-enabled self-service data catalog, right? So I think that sort of is just an example of what you're talking industrialization. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of the data governance practices should also improve that user adoption in the organization. So.
And that goes back to the earlier point on sponsorship. How do you have continued sponsorship and that buy-in? You want them to be able to explore and essentially play around with data, but you want that to be in a very controlled environment where it's contained enough that they can do that. But once you actually go and want to publish something, let's say a dashboard or a report, what have you, you want to have the right processes in place. You want the data governance sign off and the stamp of approval before you industrialize and publish that. But other than that, you want to have that flexibility for the business to test the hypothesis, really.
Yeah. So Denish, moving on, how do you sort of ensure the data governance is baked into your new projects, right? How do you avoid it from becoming an afterthought?
Yeah, so I think what I've typically done is I think data governance partners really well with data privacy and info security. I feel the 3 groups really move hand in hand. So that's one thing. One is making sure that the 3 groups do work together well. The other piece is, find a PMO office with whether it's your EPMO or PMO. I think that's where a lot of the projects will come through, an enterprise PMO office, for example. And you want to be at the forefront of that gating process. So whether you're following the agile process or waterfall, whatever the case may be, you want data governance at the beginning versus the afterthought or at the tail end of that project delivery plan. Because what you want is you want to be able to understand the data requirements within that project. You want to be able to embed the requirements into the delivery plan. And you want to make sure that the project team's looking at all things like record retention, access, data quality, data ownership. And those questions really need to be tabled at the front of the program versus the tail end. Work very closely with your PMO office, making sure that you're at the beginning of the gating process, and make sure you complete what I typically call a data impact assessment or DIN on any data related project. And those are all the requirements that you're going to work through with the project. And then be that partner as they go through the various phases of the delivery, making sure that we've got all those items sort of accounted for, signed off. So when they are ready to go live, we have good controls and good processes in place already when it comes to data.
Yeah, great. So Denish, last year I was in London attending the Gartner conference. And during the keynote speech, I think they flashed a slide talking about data governance. and then sort of just paused, right? And there was a moment of drama, right, where everyone started sort of laughing. Okay. So my question is like, that critics of data governance say that it becomes bureaucratic and may limit data adoption. So how do you balance compliance with the ability to innovate with data?
Yeah, and that exactly goes back to how we better partner, right? So what you don't want data governance to be is that tick box exercise, or what is perceived as a roadblock or a hurdle for a project or a business to move forward. You want to be able to be that partner, and so I typically set up my team as consultants. We're here to help you, advise you, and enable your strategy. So that's usually been the approach that we take, and I like my team to be embedded in the business. So the more data governance specialists or data stewards, as we call it, are embedded in the business, working with the business on a day-to-day basis, that's the best way for me to sort of embed the practice. And they're looked as a consultant or the partner versus this function that requires a sign off and a whole bunch of documents and artifacts to be created versus, hey, I am consistently sitting in your management meetings. I understand your strategy, I understand where you're headed, I understand your plans, and I understand how data can enable you. Here are the things that we should work on together as a collective group. And then you're partnering with analytics and your data visualization team, etc. But be that partner versus what some may deem data governance as a risk function.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, one experience I want to share from my previous experience, I think we were working for a federal agency at FEMA. And one of the things that, we had helped them do there is to put together a data lab kind of environment, right, to support exploration use cases, right? So I think that is one approach that, I found work well, right? That if when someone's, okay, I want to innovate with data, you can create perhaps like a safe gated space for them to do all kinds of exploration. And then if it works, then they can sort of go through the industrialization process that you sort of talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you wanna embed a culture of fail fast, right? You want to be and explore, encourage an environment where people try new things, POCs, what have you, and you want data to help drive that culture, but you also want data governance to also enable that culture, right? So again, it's the same thing in terms of making sure that we are a partner within those sort of incubators or that environment versus a hurdle. And so all you want to be able to do is make sure that you have the right access to the information at the right time for the right people. And even that data is trustworthy, right? Because if you're going to go and test hypotheses, we can't trust the data, then we don't know where the problem is, right? And so you want to make sure that we can partner with them to provide that, and then they can go and explore and do what they need to do. So yeah, exactly. I think we definitely need to be more closely aligned with those business groups.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think moving on, Danish, I think with more and more organizations sort of moving towards either considering or embracing AI for business benefits, what are some of the emerging challenges that you foresee in your field, with respect to AI?
Yeah, I think AI is picking up speed. You can see all the things that are happening in the news today with ChatGPT, etc. I think what data governance needs to do is also embrace AI and make sure that we provide again the right framework and the right practices that will enable an organization's AI strategy. Right, so that's everything from model governance, making sure that we have good access to large volumes of data, because AI is only going to get better the more learning use cases it has and the more data it has, and being trainable. So I think making sure that we have good controls around all that aspect of the data, then you have the right tool sets to support the AI ambitions of an organization. But yeah, I think it's like any other analytics. For me, it's really making sure that the foundation's set to support that journey.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think I love the part that you mentioned that you could at some point even use AI to make the data governance process itself easier. But then also data governance may have a responsibility to make sure that let's say, for example, the training data that is being used to train a model is sort of governed in a way where the concerns with transparency, bias, some of those things basically can be addressed. So
Exactly, and then that goes into the model governance space, right, where we want to make
Yeah.
sure that we sort of eliminate any of those biases.
So thank you, I think, for sharing your thoughts. And I hope that our listeners would enjoy listening to this, as well as taking away and applying that in their business. Thank you, Denish.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.